I guess with the somatic work I do, it's the non-verbal stuff gets stuck in your body. So things like aches and pains or stomach issues or recurrent headaches and migraines, often if you've had some trauma in your past, they can be symptoms. And we kind of just look at your body and where does it, where do the aches and pains come? Because often it can be linked to non-verbalized memories that, but the body remembers.
Welcome back to the You Need a Counselor podcast. This is a show presented by Heart and Solutions Counseling Agency. We release new episodes every Sunday at 5 p.m. Central and encourage you to batch up that laundry, put away the dishes, plan for the week ahead, or do any other task that might seem daunting while you give our show a listen. You might just be encouraged to call your therapist, connect with this week's guest, or seek out those services you've been considering for a while but haven't made the commitment to yet. If you are in the state of Iowa and are in need of mental or behavioral health counseling, give us a call at 1-800-531-4236. Enjoy the show.
Hello and welcome back to the You Need a Counselor podcast. My name is Dr. Julie Johnson. I'm the president and founder here at Heart and Solutions Mental Health Counseling in Iowa in the United States of America.
And I'm Chrissa Hunt. I am our Vice President in charge of the Behavioral Health Department. And this is our podcast, You Need a Counselor. So we are a podcast designed for people curious about counseling, but have barriers keeping them from experiencing the benefits of counseling. Our mission is to share stories about counseling, good, bad, and indifferent, and spread the message that everyone can benefit from mental health and behavioral health counseling services.
Our guest today joins us from the UK, where she has a therapeutic private practice where she works with people in person. She works with people over the phone or online, anywhere in the UK. We are so excited to have her here. We've got Liessa Callaghan here today with us. Liessa is a licensed psychodynamic counselor in the UK, and she works with a wide variety of people from all different backgrounds, specifically helping people with coping with trauma, with processing through trauma, and particularly doing some somatic trauma work with her clients. She loves to help people see positive change in their lives by improving self-esteem, improving resilience, and improving their ability to see those inner strengths that they have that may be hiding, but that we can see, and bringing those strengths out in people. So welcome, Liessa. Thank you for being here.
Thank you for having me on your podcast. I'm really excited to be here.
Wonderful. So tell us a little bit about psychodynamic counseling, because this is a term that we don't often hear over here in the US. So can you tell us what is a psychodynamic counselor?
Oh, okay. So psychodynamic counseling is quite a deep piece of work. When you come for psychodynamic counseling, you probably go right back into all your past experiences and look at maybe early traumas and early childhood patterns that affect you now that you're as an adult. So, patterns of behavior that are set up by your parents unconsciously and that you follow through that probably helped you survive difficult situations at the time, but I don't know, maybe not so helpful now, so that, you might be a bit too cautious in your relationships, or you might be a bit too trusting, or you might be a people pleaser, or you might be quite avoidant. And we work out what those patterns are and where they've come from. And it's kind of self-knowledge helps you then change your behavior and to improve your relationships. So it's a very relational kind of counseling.
Do you primarily work with adults then who kind of already have those like established patterns that they want to change, or do you work with a wide variety of ages then with psychodynamics?
So I work with young people as well. So I work with young people aged 16 plus, because I think for psychodynamic counseling, you need to have I think for very young children, it doesn't really work. So from about 16 onwards, it's quite a good kind of counselling if you need to go back and look at the past. So yeah, I work with young people, young adults, older adults, anyone who wants to come and really understand about themselves and look inwards. If they can come and we'll do some work together.
So by the age of 16, a lot of those patterns are already set up and established and able to be identified then with clients?
Yes, because a lot of in psychodynamic counseling, a lot of the patterns are set up almost pre-verbally, so almost right from the beginning. And it's just, there's a lot of stuff about the way your carer holds you as a baby and the way they care for you, and there's a lot of attachment stuff in there as well, whether your mother or father is attentive enough and you can be securely attached to your parents, or whether you're avoidantly attached because you know that if you ask for support it's not going to be there, so you become what we would call avoidant, or whether sometimes the attachment is there, you're given feedback, other times you're ignored, so that we would call ambivalent attachment. So you're never quite sure whether your needs are going to be met or not, and it starts very young. There's been such a lot of study in psychodynamic counseling about very young children and how they react, and so yeah, it's all there right from the beginning, and we might go back to your earliest memories and thoughts and feelings, and sometimes even pre-verbal, because I guess with the somatic work I do, it's the non-verbal stuff gets stuck in your body. So things like aches and pains or stomach issues or recurrent headaches and migraines, often if you've had some trauma in your past, they can be symptoms, and we kind of just look at your body and where does it, where do the aches and pains come, what causes that, when do you get triggered, and how does your body react, because often it can be linked to non-verbalized memories that but the body remembers.
Can you give some examples of like what those relationship patterns might be that people might like reach out to you and come to counseling for, to kind of like figure out what their attachment style was, like why they seek out the services?
Okay, so a lot of emotional neglect, that's very common, where people have had really quite harsh parenting and they don't feel understood by their parents. So it could be that, they're told off a lot, or things they want to do as a young teenager or older teenager, they're restricted from doing. They're not allowed, and they can't understand why. So they don't trust themselves because they feel like their parents have never trusted them to take risks and to be able to well, some of the work that I go back to is when people were teenagers and they quite often remember things that have happened to them, such as being parents being really overly critical or overly restrictive on things that they were allowed to do. So they either people please to try and get their parents on side and to be a good child, and then they're repressing their own impulses, or they rebel. So I've had clients who have been really angry and traumatized by things that their parents have how their parents have made them feel, really. Or sometimes it has been quite physical abuse as well, which is really hard to work with because it's really easy to remember the physical abuse. Emotional neglect is a little harder to work with because often clients come and they're quite confused at the beginning. They're not quite sure whether whether it was abuse or neglect, or they got complete lack of self-belief, I guess you would say. And so we're working out what's happened to make you not trust yourself, what patterns were set up when you were younger. That's our starting point, is always what's happened and how are you feeling now, and then we work from that point.
So I mean, it's just so interesting because there's so much that has to do, especially with teenagers, as you're talking about. There's so much that has to do with autonomy and being able to develop into our own individual person. And you do so much work that's so heavily relationship focused in terms of going back into those traumatic experiences and then the focus on relationships moving forward in our lives. And so when it comes to autonomy for teenagers, as a parent, that can be such a scary thing. And so many of the challenges, I think that teenagers experience due to maybe patterns or messages that they're getting as teenagers, is that parents sometimes have a hard time figuring out, okay, how do I give autonomy to my child? How do I trust my child? How do I balance my responsibility as a parent to, hey, they got to get up for school, right? Like they have to put on shoes. They have to do these things. I have these responsibilities that I have to meet, and at the same time allowing children to have that autonomy and be able to make those decisions so they can have the experience of making those decisions, experiencing those potential consequences or outcomes of those decisions, and being able to learn that for themselves. How do you suggest that maybe parents of teenagers who my child's 9, so I know that's coming for me, right? So, how do we balance that and still create that secure, safe space where, yes, I want my child to have autonomy. I want her to be making decisions every day. And I also want her to know that she can come to me when the outcome of those decisions are not what she expected or not what she wanted. What suggestions might you give to somebody in that situation?
Yeah, I think you're really right. It's so difficult being a parent, especially with all the dangers we have online and out in the world. So you're constantly balancing judgments, aren't you? And parents come with their own experience of parenting as well, which again is embedded as a pattern when they're young. So I guess there's a difference between the kind of parenting you're talking about, where someone is trying to do their best for their child and make decisions about how much their child can manage, because that parent is quite attuned to their child, I think, or is trying to be anyway. There's, I guess, the kind of people that I work with, the parents are not always very attuned to what their children need as they're growing up. So, and it may not be a deliberate thing at all. It may be just they just don't, they've got a different parenting style. They've got anxieties of their own, so it's hard to let go, as you say. So it's more pathologized, I guess, when it becomes an issue that you can't develop your own personal sense of self. That's when I think you start turning inwards. And part of the psychodynamic theory is that we'll do almost anything to please our parents. They are our carers. We can only survive by because of our parents, especially when we're very young. So that's the thing. You will adapt to whatever situation you will be in. And I think the theory, or as you know, what happens is that you internalize what's going on outside, and then you feel like you're doing things wrong if you're being told off, rather than being able to look at the wider environment. Oh, my parents had quite a challenging upbringing of their own. You don't think like that as a child. It's just like, my parent gets angry if I do this, okay, I must be bad. So I won't do this. And then there's a lack of trust in yourself to take risks and learn how to manage in the outside world, and that's where anxiety comes in. So it's really different ways of, it's a different kind of path, isn't it, rather than parenting that is really solid and always trying to do your best for your child, and communication is good. I guess that's what I was thinking.
So do you work with a lot of parents then that want to kind of change how they're parenting, or more like people who are trying to change because of how they were parented?
Yeah, I tend to work more with people that want to change because of how they were parented. It's really interesting because this, so counselling is my second career, and my first career, I was a school Senko, which I dealt with all the children with special educational needs or emotional difficulties. And I saw a lot of very anxious parents, and they really did struggle because their children needed support from, you know, extra educational support, all that kind of stuff. So I saw a lot of family patterns, and I guess that's what made me really interested in counselling. Um, I I could have gone into counselling children, but there was this thing about autonomy and having the choice for yourself. And I guess children can go into counselling. This is how I felt. But if their environment is still the same, they may learn a lot about themselves as a child, but they can't do anything to change it. So I guess my interest progressed into where adults can then reflect on their experiences and make those changes for themselves through reflecting back on and learning about the wider environment and their own inner world, I guess.
Yeah, and you talked about the somatic trauma work and how that trauma gets stored in our body and kind of represents itself through those physical symptoms. What are some of those interventions that you do when somebody goes, okay, I'm identifying that when something like this happens, or it reminds me of this thing, then I start to get pain in this part of my body, or I start to feel tense in this part of my body. What kinds of interventions are you doing there?
So I guess we start off by actually just realizing where the pain in your body might actually be. So it's, I've had young adults coming to me they're coming with panic attacks, and we're trying to work out where the trigger is and what the message is, what's causing the panic attack, and we'll track back. So it's individual for every person. What's making you feel that your body is going into fight, flight, or freeze? So why is your body doing that? And we're trying to work out what's caused that symptom. So the panic attack is a symptom of something more emotional based, I guess. So that's, for some people, it might be about panic attacks. We're working out. For other people, it might be feelings in particular parts of their body. So it might be feeling, pain in your heart internally. I've had people saying, my heart really hurts. My But I just say that's a somatic symptom, of what's going on for you. It's being stored here. There's some sadness, or there's a feeling here. What do you think that links to? And we just explore really gently over time. Oh, it could be headaches, stiff shoulders, very tight muscles. It could be gastrointestinal issues. That comes up quite a lot. So we're looking at, well, when you're anxious, what happens? And it can be, the body reacts. You might have acid reflux or diarrhea, and that's just like a real anxiety reaction. So all of these things, and we just try and focus on that part of the body and think about what you're feeling at that moment. And then we might look at doing a bit of breathing, slowing everything down, but just understanding from the first point, and then we can work from what that links to from your past, or from the relationship that wasn't quite right and that has left its mark in you somewhere. So we just do a lot of recognizing what's going on at the beginning.
And how did you get interested in somatic trauma work and learning like how different pains in your body can correlate to like mental health?
Well, I work in a local college as well as having my private practice. So I train other counsellors as well. And so I was working on one of the modules was about somatic trauma. And I just found it so interesting that I've gone off and done quite a lot of extra training for myself and reading. So I just find it fascinating. So I guess there's quite a few theories, and I like the fact that it's women as well, and it's modern women that are doing a lot of this work. So there's Janina Fisher, who lives out in America somewhere now. She's very interesting, and she does a lot of work on the somatic effects of trauma. And then there's Pat Ogden as well. So I've been reading all of their stuff, and I don't know if you know Bessel van der Kolk. He wrote the book called The Body Keeps the Score. So that's a really interesting book if you want to find out more about somatic trauma. He's got a foundation that did a lot of research on that, and that's part of where EMDR came from as well. So it's just really interesting seeing how modern psychotherapists are making these links between the body and the mind, really, and our emotions.
Yeah, and you talked about how so many of the experiences that we have in even pre-verbal childhood can establish whether we see things as whether we internalize those experiences that come to us later in life, or whether we can see kind of the other pieces at work that maybe don't have to do with us but are still affecting us. And so there is really that it's so fluid, that shift of personal responsibility, and we're in the United States. How I don't, well, I'll ask you how it is in the United Kingdom, because in the United States there's such a focus on independence, right? And everybody's kind of like pull yourself up by your bootstraps type of thinking, right? Where we go, okay, if we've got a problem, we need to be the one to solve it, right? If there's something that needs to be done, we have to be the one to do it, and we have to push ahead and do that. And so I know that in other countries and in other cultures, there isn't so much of that kind of press of, if you want something done, it's got to be you, right? That feeling of that. And so I feel that here in the States, with that kind of culture, that it can be very easy to internalize those situations that are around us that we have no control over, but kind of culture tells us you do have control, you should have control over it, and you should take care of it, or you should change it, or you should do something about it, even when those are situations that we have no control over. So I liked your example of a child internalizing a guardian or caregiver's response to something, and saying, okay, that's a me problem, right? Versus, oh, that is a, like, my parent is having a hard time, right? Or my parent has stuff going on, and that might not have to do with me. But I think in our culture, we're so like, it's all about the individual, that it can make it so easy to slip into that feeling of everything is because of me, or everything is my responsibility to handle or change.
Yeah, and I think it's quite similar over here in the UK. And a lot of clients come to me and just say, why can't I cope? Everyone else can cope. Why is it I panic when this happens? Nobody else does. And there's such a lot of kind of self-blame in there. So I kind of work with them. Let's have a look at your background. Let's have a look at your life now. Let's have a look at what's been going on, because some things just knock your resilience, and this is just part of it. And it's not that you can't cope, it's often it's the other way around. You've coped with so much, that you've absorbed so much, that you're full. There's no more room and capacity to cope. So you're kind of stronger than most people because you're carrying so much. But let's see what's a reasonable amount to carry, what's a reasonable amount for you to take on. There's this real perfectionism thing going on. I must be able to do everything. Well, it's like, not really, especially with some of the experiences you've had. It's too much. You're struggling at the moment, and it doesn't mean that it's going to be a struggle forever. But let's look at what support you've got around you. Let's look at what's happened and understand that, and why it's a struggle now. So it's trying to make people feel it's not all entirely their fault. They don't have to kind of conquer the universe all the time. And it's okay for things not to be great, and that you're struggling now. We can rebuild your resilience, and do things perhaps in a different way that's not so quite emotionally as depleting. And you'll know how far you can go and what your strengths are, and when to stop. So there's a lot in that, I think, of just being a bit kinder to yourself.
Yeah, definitely. Well, and when you mentioned too, like somatic trauma is more like feeling like where it's affecting your body. Do you find people struggle with realizing the connection between like mental health and physical health? Because I know here we always talk about like physical health, it's easy to go to the doctor when you're in pain, but switching that to like going to a therapist when you're in pain as well to also kind of work through that. Do you feel like people struggle with that there as well?
Definitely. And it's so frustrating because often people have been to the doctor and had unexplained pain, and they've gone and had it all investigated, and there's nothing has come up. So they feel like, well, what can I do? I'm just suffering here. And so I think it can be a relief just even to know what the cause of the pain is, even if it doesn't remove it, just perhaps understanding that sometimes it's not a physical condition, it's just your body is reacting to the emotions that you're holding on to. So I think that can help people just shift slightly in their expectation and their understanding of what's going on for them.
Yeah, I love that. It really goes back to another thing you said about being okay and accepting that we're okay as people, and that, the outcomes that we're having from our productivity or the outcomes that we're having around us in our situations are not who we are, and those are not what makes us valuable or worthy. And that is such a strong cultural, it feels like countercultural, right? To have that belief or that thought that we're not our outcomes, right? And we're not our what we produce, and that if things aren't going the way that we want them to be going, that we're still okay. And that doesn't, I think that message doesn't get said enough. There's such a tight correlation for so many people between what we can do or what we can achieve versus how we are and understanding. And so I loved when you said, even understanding where the pain is coming from, even if it doesn't change the pain right away, even if the pain doesn't go away right away, just the understanding of where it's coming from and why is beneficial and is helpful for people.
Yeah, I think you're so right. And it's kind of counterintuitive, isn't it? Because, like you say, we do feel like we have to achieve well in life, and that we put all these kind of expectations on ourselves, and then we wonder why we can't achieve them all. Well, just being alive, you've achieved something, and just keeping going, being here. And people often have such high expectations of themselves. I just think, if you're managing a family or you're managing your life, wherever you are, we start from that point, and then what is it you want? What is it that your real values are? Your values rather than the values around you. What would make you feel happy and fulfilled? Rather than, I saw this video on YouTube or my social media and people are doing this. Let's forget about that. Let's focus on you. And you're the most important person in this room at the moment. And what you need and what's going to make you feel good is what we're focusing on and where we're going with this therapy.
Yeah, and you mentioned rebuilding resilience too, and a lot of people like needing to kind of start over and rebuilding that within themselves. What interventions do you do to help people work on that?
Well, psychodynamic counseling is there's quite a lot of talking involved, and a lot of it is in a reflection and self-understanding. But a lot of it is just pointing out as well, like, look, you're telling me you haven't got any resilience, but look what you've done and look what you've achieved. So there's quite a lot of, well, maybe this is just me, but I try and be very positive with my clients. However depleted you are, whatever resources you think you lack, well, you've got some, you're here, you made it here. So we've got a starting point to work from. So let's look at the resources you have got and what you're doing right and build from that. So there's a lot of kind of positive. I don't tell my clients that they're doing well, but we work out between us, which parts of your life are actually quite functional. So that's your kind of that's your baseline, because not all of your life is dysfunctional. There's maybe some feelings that are, that are hanging around and that are stuck, but we can work on that and we can understand them and put them into context. And then we just kind of start developing confidence from knowing yourself, knowing your limits, knowing what's reasonable for you to do rather than trying to fit in with everyone else. So it's about a more personalized approach to life, I think.
Yeah, and you have a blog on your website, and you've got there was one that I was reading from last July, and it's about the superego and the feeling of being watched. And you had mentioned perfectionism in this interview, and you had also mentioned the conscious mind and the subconscious mind. And so I'm super interested in this idea of, that internal watchdog or that internal authoritarian kind of feeling. Because as adults, I think sometimes there's this idea that, well, when we're children, we've got caregivers and we've got parents and we've got people, kind of telling us what to do all the time. And then we get to be adults and we're like, wait, nobody's making me get up and brush my teeth, right? Nobody's making me do these things. And so sometimes we kind of overdevelop, or we have that internalized authority figure that can be so strong. And it's different rebelling against that than it is rebelling against our parents, right? As teenagers. So can you speak a little bit about that? Because I just find that very, very interesting.
Yeah, it's hard to control our own mind, isn't it? And it's hard to, as you say, we have all these expectations of ourselves. So that inner watchdog can be on such high alert that it feels like you're failing all the time. You're striving for perfection, but it's not realistic, is it? It's not realistic. Sometimes we will make mistakes. So trying to be perfect all the time, and it feels like you're fitting your own needs around something external, even though it might be mental. You feel like out there's this way of being perfect. Well, there isn't really. This is just like a product of your mind, isn't it? Trying to set these rules that are almost unattainable and that you're going to fail. So then the inner negative talk comes and builds up, and that's where a lot of anxiety can lie as well. So I guess part of what I do is kind of challenge, well, why does it have to be like that? Why do you have to be, why do you have to run the house and work full time and look after all your children? And only you have to do this, how is this reasonable? How are you going to manage it all? And then it's up to the person to kind of think about, okay, maybe this is a bit unrealistic. I'm using up all my energy, but where's the energy for you just to be a person and for you to kind of rebuild your resources back up when they're depleted? You're just running yourself into the ground trying to please everyone else. But where's that coming from? No one's really telling you to do that, but you feel like there's a projection somewhere that's making you feel like you have to, or the expectation is there.
Absolutely. When we have that very strong, judgmental voice going on for ourselves, and it's so easy sometimes too to have that build up as resentments against other people in our lives as well. So I remember one time this was maybe a couple years ago when my daughter was younger, and I remember saying to my husband, like, how come I have to do all, X, Y, and Z? Why is that my job? And he said, that isn't your job. And so he said, like, you always do it, or if I do it, you tell me not to do it, right? Or that, like, you don't like the way I do it, or whatever it is. And so I was able to notice, like, oh, I then have resentments against other people that I, kind of project that internalized authority figure onto other people, saying, like, well, you're making me do that, right? Or you're like, I have to do that because otherwise that'll inconvenience you or upset you or whatever it is. And I'm putting that on them when I do that, right? That voice and those strict rules are coming from inside of me. But it's so easy for that to get projected out and to go, well, now I'm angry at that person, right? Because I said that I would do something for them. And now I'm angry with them because I feel like they're making me do that, right? And so that understanding of being able to say, no, wait, who says, right? Who says we have to be all of these things? Who says we have to do all of these things? And it is a lot more difficult, and our brains will automatically try to find a target for that resentment, right? To try to ease that pain that's caused by the dissonance between what we think we're expected to do and what we're actually literally able to do, that in a reasonable way. And so our brain goes, well, what's causing that, right? And it's so easy to look around us and say, oh, that's the reason, that's the reason, that's the reason. When in so many cases, and in my case, in that situation, it wasn't my husband saying, you're responsible for this. It was me saying I'm responsible for this, and then moving in a way that then set up my life to where that became true because I thought that it was true. And so I made it be true in my life. And then I was resentful about that. So what would you say for people who kind of recognize that? Like, oh, that's, I'm prone to resentment about that because I put those kind of barricades or limits and restrictions on myself.
Yeah, well, it's interesting because once you understood that, you were able to make the change and change. Well, I'm assuming that you were able to make some changes to make it less difficult and less absolute, that you didn't have to do everything. And that's the whole point, isn't it? When you understand and you know something and you know that some kind of unconscious behavior patterns been happening, that's when you can take control and make the changes consciously. If you don't understand it and it's just happening unconsciously, it will keep happening because you don't know. So that's the whole point of counselling, that to help you bring the stuff that's unconscious and those patterns that you're just doing without thinking, to make you aware of them so that you're in control, not just your mind or a pattern. Then you can take charge and you can decide what you want to do. It's all about that, being in control and having the choices to make the choice that works for you.
Yeah, and I think it's such a great theme of this interview and of what I'm hearing from you is, the understanding and the exploration of what's going on is what causes the change. And that change can look so different for any person that's going through that process. And that your interventions are not about what the change is, because what the change is will naturally occur in a person who has that understanding and goes through the exploration to gain that understanding. So I think that's such a great, I just feel like you're highlighting that so much in this interview, and that is how counseling is designed and should be, is that there are so many times that that people think about going to counseling, and then there's that fear of like, well, they're going to make me make changes, right? They're going to tell me I should be doing this or I should be doing that. And I think what you're just really highlighting here in this episode is that the counseling role is the exploration. It is the journey. It is the seeking of that understanding and gaining that understanding over time. And then what that change is one, going to be natural. It's not necessarily going to be something you have to force, right? So when we think about going to the gym, right, there's a lot of resistance there for so many people, because it's like, oh, I'm going to have to like push my body, right? There's going to be pain involved. I'm going to have to use mental energy to push this. And what you're highlighting here is, no, any changes that happen are going to naturally occur. They shouldn't feel pushed. They shouldn't feel forced. It's just that when we see something differently, when we see the map of the trees from above, then we can go, oh, yeah, this path makes sense. And we're not forcing ourselves down a path that we might not understand why we're going down.
Yeah, yeah. And I think everyone is the expert in their own life, really, even though they may not be aware of all the parts of it, but you know inside of you somewhere what's going to work for you or not. It's not for me to tell you what to do, because I can't tell you what's going to work for you, but I can help you try and work out what's going on for you and what you want to change, and where you want life to be different. Why go to the gym if you love dancing? Go and dance.
Yeah. And you mentioned that you do services in person and over the phone and online. Can you kind of talk about the differences maybe of how you'd approach counseling or interventions with clients if they're over the phone or online versus in-person sessions?
Um, so yeah, it always has to be in a confidential space. That's really important. Obviously, if it's online or on the telephone, it's then the client's responsibility to make sure that that happens. In terms of intervention, it's quite similar in terms of I will be listening and interacting with you in the same way as I would if you were in the room. Sometimes I do use worksheets with quite understanding different somatic things and, using the worksheets for the somatic work. But then I would email them to you in advance, and then we would have a look at them in the sessions, and discuss them. Although I never have a whole session where we're just focusing on somatic work. It's kind of always led by the person who's in front of me, and that might be part of the work. We've always agreed in advance that the person I'm working with wants to have a look and understand what's going on in their body as well. So I send things, and it's for you to decide if it's going to be useful, and then we may discuss it or we may not. If you feel like, that's not for me, then we move on to something else. So it's very fluid. Yeah, and a lot of, hopefully, me being attuned to you and listening and feeding back to you what I'm hearing, and maybe sometimes challenging you, and some of those thoughts that I can feel are just kind of maybe not helpful to you, maybe just challenging you to have a look at that if I hear that. So, but mainly it's the client is always in control of the sessions, and I lead and listen and work with you and whatever's on your mind that particular week.
Yeah, it's I love your approach that, we know as people what we need. We know as people what's going to work for us, and there are so many barriers to us following that natural instinct, that natural feeling of I like this, I don't like this, right? As children, we're taught it doesn't matter if you like something, right? And we're taught that over and over and over and over. Well, I don't like going to school. Okay, it doesn't matter, right? Or I'm hungry during the school day. Doesn't matter, right? I need to go to the bathroom during a test. Doesn't matter. And so we're taught as children just over and over and over that to suppress that feeling, suppress those feelings we have, suppress those instincts that we have, and those feelings that say, this doesn't feel right for me, and this does feel right for me. And we have so little control as children that we're not able to follow those instincts. And so then we get trained not to follow them, right? We're completely trained. Don't listen to that inner voice. Just do what we're supposed to do. Follow the guardrails. And so what you're talking about is really an unlearning in so many ways of those, and saying, no, we're an adult now. And so if something feels wrong, we do have power, right? We have so much, so many people have so much learned helplessness, even without, substantial traumatic situations in childhood, even with secure attachments. We've got so much learned helplessness because as children, we are helpless in so many situations. And so what you're really talking about is being able to accept that we're adults now. We do have choices. We have choices we didn't when we were children. And we are allowed and able because we are capable, and our instincts are trustworthy and they are right. And that we can follow them, and we're allowed to take those baby steps towards them and test those theories. And so I just think that's beautiful. That idea of, yeah, if we're not feeling confident in our own choices, there's likely reasons, there's systemic reasons, and then there's individual reasons why we might not be feeling confident in our own choices. And we're in a different situation now as adults, and we can take those steps to test those now.
Yeah, and as you say, it can be really hard to do that because we just kind of follow the rules, and that happens from about the age of 4 to the age of 18, and it's really hard to step out of that and come into the adult world, and start making some really big decisions about what you're going to do with your life, and what a relationship's going to look like, what's going to work for you. But it is about trusting yourself and that listening to that inner voice. And sometimes I do say to clients, listen to your belly. Your belly, your gut will always tell you the truth. But it's so easy to override it and just think, oh no, I can't do that. Oh no, that's wrong. Oh no, they're not really like that. Listen to your gut, because more often than not, your gut will tell you the truth. And it's just, we've got to tune into that and actually then believe it ourselves and the messages that we receive.
Beautiful. So if you could give one suggestion to somebody maybe on the fence about starting counseling, what suggestion might you give them?
I think for me, the most important thing is that you have a good rapport with your counsellor and that you feel like they understand what you're going through and that they are helping you to reach your own goals and to be in control and to understand yourself. So I would say go with an open mind, but don't necessarily feel like the first counsellor you meet is going to be the counsellor that you can work with. And if you, again, trust your gut, if you feel like, oh, this person's not quite getting me, move on, find someone else, find someone who works for you. And that's where the really beautiful work can happen, because there's got to be that really good rapport and understanding of what you need as a person to help you grow. And it's very individual.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, if you were listening and you were interested in either in-person, telephone, or online therapy with Liessa in the UK, you can find her website at perspectivescounselingservice.co.uk, and we'll link that in our show notes as well.
I'm Liessa Callaghan, and I need a counsellor.
And I'm Chrissa Hunt.
And I'm Julie Johnson, and we need a counselor.
And so do you.
Bye.
Thank you for listening to the You Need a Counselor podcast. We are so grateful that you're here. You can also find and connect with You Need a Counselor on Facebook and Instagram. If you've enjoyed today's show, please take a moment to like, review, or leave a comment, as all of these things help others to find and benefit from the podcast as well. If you're in the state of Iowa and interested in mental health counseling or behavioral health intervention services, give us